Welcome to the Daily MBA, where business wisdom is served fresh and fast, straight from one of the top MBA programs in the world. I'll give you summaries of my lectures and readings, as well as the most important insights gained from an MBA, so you can apply all of this knowledge in every business. Let's get started. In today's episode, I'm going to start explaining game theory. And game theory happens when somebody else is choosing something that I care about, and also the opposite, I choose something that somebody else cares about. And for game theory, we're going to study lots of things, like which strategy are players using, when this strategy is taken, and what do you know when you're picking that strategy. But for that, we're going to consider three things. First, strategies. Strategies are going to be represented in a couple ways that I'll explain in a few minutes, but they can be diverse strategies depending on either your end or the other player's end. The second thing is the outcomes. Outcomes may vary, and some may give you a higher payoff, which is the third element, and some may give you a lower payoff. So you will always have to consider which strategy will you use, which are the outcomes or options that you can use, and then which are going to be the payoffs that you receive from every outcome. For game theory, there are two ways of presenting games. First is the normal form games, which are going to be the ones that I will start with, and then you have the extensive form games. In this second type of games, the order matters. So let's start with the normal form games, and I'll start explaining the first important strategy, and it's called the dominant strategy. A dominant strategy is the one that gives a player a larger payoff than any other, and this is going to be regardless of what the other player does or chooses. And this is important because it may not necessarily be the best for you, but it's going to be the best compared to every other outcome. And not everyone may have a dominant strategy. So I'm going to show you this game where we have player A that may choose up or down, and player B, which may choose left or right. As you can see, if we saw at player A, all of the options would be better if this player chose up. Why is that? Because if player B chose left, player A can decide to go up or down. Up will give him 10, down will give him minus 10. So between 10 and minus 10, of course you would choose 10. Now, if player B played right, player A would again be faced with the up or down decision. Going up would give him 15 and going down would give him 10. So again, up would be the better decision. So what we get from this is that always player A will play up, because this is going to be the strategy that will be best against anything else than player B is doing. But what would player B do? You may initially say, oh, he'll go left because he gets a better payoff if he goes left. But what you have to first think, it's the dominant strategy. Does player B have a dominant strategy? No. Because first, if player A chooses up, he would be better off by playing left. But if player A chooses down, he would be better off by playing right. So this incertitude is giving player B a lack of a dominant strategy. He doesn't know where to pick because he won't get a better chance regardless of A's decision. So A, in this case, has a dominant strategy, but B has another type of strategy that we could call, and it's the best response strategy. So when I was telling you B should consider playing left, it was because we should consider the other player's dominant strategy if there is, and then you should react to that strategy for your own best payoff. We already know that player A will play up because that is going to be his dominant strategy. So what should you choose? Well, you can choose either left or right. Left will give you 20, right will give you 8. So what would be more beneficial for you would be, of course, choosing left. So left is going to be the best response strategy. And even though this one's not a dominant strategy, this one will show the best relevant thing that you can do in the decision of the other player. So now, let's consider a third important concept after considering the best response and the dominant strategy. This one's going to be called the Nash equilibrium. The Nash equilibrium is going to be a strategy for each player where every player has the best response to the strategies of all rivals. So, in other words, the Nash equilibrium are the mutual best responses, and no one would like to unilaterally change the strategy that he or she is playing. So in this case, our Nash equilibrium would be the one that we just saw. It's the one that's giving the best response to both of the players. Now, let's study 3 types of normal games that would be a little bit more tricky when we're considering these strategies, outcomes, and payoffs. First, what if we get the possibility of multiple equilibria? This may be called network externalities. And here, it's going to be more of a coordination game, where you will pick based on the collaborative choices. Let's assume, for example, that a school is planning on buying either all Windows or all Mac computers because this will generalize all the support system that they may provide. If someone chooses to buy a personal Mac and the entire school went for Windows, you'll receive 0. But then, if you chose Windows and the university chose Windows, you will both get a lot of payoff. These are going to be the network externalities. And here, the criteria itself doesn't imply that it's a good equilibrium because it may be a bad equilibrium as well. In this case, you can see that we can see Windows or Mac as an equilibrium, but you could also say Mac and Windows will give the same payoff to both persons. That one's not the one they want, but it's going to be similar. So this coordination games have the possibilities of multiple equilibria. The second thing that we may need to use is when we don't have Nash equilibrium, and these are called pure strategy games. In this ones, the best response would be a mix because all the options are going to be showing bad responses. In mixed strategies, you would find that only a mix of some of the decisions would be the ones that work. And in any finite game, there's always going to be a mixed strategy equilibrium that's going to be the solution for this pure strategy games. The third type of game would be the prisoner's dilemma. And this one, you may have heard about it because prisoner's dilemma is what usually happens when you have prisoners that are being interviewed before getting a trial or while being arrested. The game situation would be this. Let's imagine you have in the police office 2 persons. You offer one person that if they talk, they'll have the benefit of going out but punishing their friend. If they don't talk, they may have the other person calling out on them, or if neither of them talks, then they'll both go out free. But if both of them talk, they'll both go to jail. So what should you do? What we have in this type of situation is that we have 2 dominant strategies. And so these ones are going to give only one benefit of Nash equilibrium, but this one will give both players a lower payoff. Even though the best decision would be not talking for both of them, neither player can be trusted. So this is why the best outcome and the equilibrium outcome is always going to be the one that's talk and talk. And this situation may be replicated in other parts, not only in jail or prisoner's dilemma, as it is, but maybe in markets. So deciding if it's going to be a low price or a high price. Lower price would be the dominant Nash equilibrium because high price would mean that you can't trust the other persons in the market. Now, there's another element that we should consider when playing normal games, and it's how finite the game is. If you get an infinite repetition, you may have to consider other strategies like tit for tat. In this one, you start collaborating, but if you try to get away, the other person will be very punishing, but they may also be forgiving. So each participant is going to start mimicking the action of the opponent after cooperation on the first round. If I'm good, you're good. Then if you betray me, I'll betray you. But eventually we can start collaborating again. Tit for tat is usually used for games that have repeated moves in a series of similar games, and this may trigger strategies that can support collusion when interest rate is low enough. Some factors that may allow collusion, which is illegal, is the small number of large firms and the information that's shared between them. Tit for tat, for example, would be the collaboration that two companies can do for setting up a high price for collusion or cartels. Now, what if we have strategies where the order matters? These ones are going to be the extensive foreign games, and they are usually presented as game trees. In these game trees, you'll usually first have one decision that's emerging 2 or 3 possibilities, and then after that one, you'll get branches from the person that's taking the second decision. You could even get more and more branches deciding on the order of persons to choose, but for simplifying it, I'm just going to show you a decision where 2 players are deciding 2 options. This is going to be a couple. And what happens is that the couple will decide if they're going to a rock concert or a classical concert. The man would prefer the rock concert and the woman would prefer the classical concert. But what happens is that they would like to go together to whichever concert they go. So if the man decides to go to rock and then the woman has to choose, she would rather go to rock than classical. But if she decides to go to classical and he had to choose, then he would also prefer going to classical than going to rock by himself. This is going to be a game tree. And for this extensive foreign games, you have the strategies that are going to be based on the timing. The first player will have a normal one, but the second player has a different strategy because he will have to consider the strategy that the first player used. This is going to lead to a sub-game perfect Nash equilibrium. In this one, it's abbreviated as SPNA. And how do you get it? Basically by working backwards. In this one, you should be careful to not allow incredible threats or incredible promises. Incredible threats would be those situations where a player would willingly take a decision that would give him a bad payoff. Let's go back to our example of the couple. If the woman already chose classical, we would assume that the man is not going to choose rock by himself because this wouldn't benefit him and it wouldn't give him any payoff. So this would be an incredible threat. But incredible promise would also be something that you're not willing to do because it won't give you any benefit or it wouldn't be real that you chose that thing. So these are promises that don't have the incentive to be carried out. For finding out the sub-game perfect Nash equilibrium, we should start looking first at the payoffs that the woman has in this case, as she's the one that's taking the second decision. So when we look at this specific game, we would get either 1 or 0 for the first situation, and from those, we would rather choose 1, rock, and then we would have -1 or 2. From those, we would rather use classical, which is 2. So now, we have to pass on to the first player to see which one he would prefer, now that we already have the 2 finals from the other woman's decision. If we had to compare between 2 and 1, the first player would choose 2, which is rock. So the sub-game perfect Nash equilibrium would consider this. The man will choose rock and the woman choose rock if he does rock, but this would be compared to if he chose classical and she would choose classical.